Good evening, everyone, at least in the Netherlands, and good day, good morning to all our international viewers. This might come as a bit of a surprise to see me as your host this evening for Azure Thursday. Well, it kind of was a surprise to me as well, to be honest, because I kind of still miss my partner in crime. But that definitely doesn't stop us to offer you some really cool content this evening. So, guess this is me introducing myself. So, my name is Esther Bartel, and instead of being announced, I'll probably be the one making the announcement myself. So, I joined the Azure Thursday team as one of their hosts, and happy to spread even more Azure fun and share more Azure fun with you all. So tonight we have two presenters that are gonna be focusing on IoT. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, IoT still kind of is my home automation projects. So I'm really looking forward to get educated and to discover a whole new world of possibilities and to become even more creative. So without much further ado, I guess it's time to introduce you to our first speaker of the evening. So I would like to welcome Sarah Maston. And hopefully, hi, at least we have our speakers present. That's a good start, definitely. So, and I am seeing that Sjoukje is jumping on board as well. So she will probably be right with us and lift that mysterious black screen that we're seeing right now. Sarah, I hope I pronounce your name correctly because, well, I did try to prepare very well today. And I did some research on LinkedIn, and I noticed that you're not just a senior solution architect at Microsoft. You're not just one of the founders of Project 15, which I'm pretty sure you're going to tell us all about in the next 45 minutes. But I also noticed that you started even earlier on with promoting IoT and finding creative solutions, and even getting awarded for it by Microsoft when you basically invented Project Edison. So can you perhaps share a little bit about that?
We cannot hear you.
Yes, I was going to say. So this is the, I'm sorry, your mute bingo that we're doing right now.
What a start, Esther, with your first hosting session. I'm too late. Sarah is on mute.
I already announced my introduction or joining Azure Thursday. So yeah. I think we're all good to go. Except for maybe finding some way to make sure that we unmute Sarah.
Yes, maybe Henk can help us with that.
Yes.
Oh, Sarah has a solution.
No.
No? Maybe it helps, Sarah, if you rejoin the call again?
This is the moment where IoT is going to save us. Not yet.
No.
And maybe this is the moment where I am at least realizing, Sjoukje, that that dance that we discussed earlier might just need to happen.
Yeah. We should definitely rehearse something. If we, yes.
We have... Ta-da! Technology Great. Saves us again. Thank you.
All right. So Hi, yes, Project Edison. Actually, Project Edison led to Project 15. I'm going to talk about that today.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Great.
but
Then
I'm so happy to be here, even though I don't know how to use my computer, obviously. It's
no,
fine.
no worries. No worries.
No worries.
So
We're kind of enjoying the to make it spontaneous and a bit chaotic sometimes, because I guess that adds to the fun that we're having these evenings. So
It's live TV. This is what live TV is about, or live web TV.
yes,
yeah,
and I guess it is a day in our lives in these times still, trying to get people to feel invited into our virtual homes. So I guess with every home there might be some hiccups on the line and along the way. But so then I'm not going to ask you to explain Project Edison because you obviously already have some planned in the presentation.
Ooh.
But I did notice that you have been a very strong advocate of IoT and not just, well, as I explained to the audience previously, for me, IoT still is kind of stuck in my home automation challenges. But what I love about, and I'm sure you're going to dive into that in just a minute, but what I love about the way you look at IoT is that it's a very creative way of finding commercial solutions that are out there and find new ways to incorporate them and to help not just commercial other new projects, but also a more humane usage of IoT. So
Yeah, I mean, IoT really opens the door for all of us to reinvent, solutions in a super different way. The sense of you're thinking about retail, especially in our situation that we're in with the pandemic. Now we have all these incredibly touchless systems and sensors and everything. So even thinking differently, it really opens the door to think differently, even on more traditional use cases that we're used to. I feel.
yeah, I'm really interested to definitely hear you more, speak more, and present more on IoT and the way you incorporate that, especially in Project 15. So I guess even though I still have a couple of questions, I'm gonna let you start with the presentation, Sarah. And then afterwards, we'll come back and I'll also make sure that I keep an eye out on any questions that might occur during the presentation and get back to you for some Q&A at the end.
Okay, great. I think Hank was going to roll a video before I...
We lose one elephant from the planet every 15 minutes. We will lose all elephants in 10 years. It is that statistic that pushed me into action. 15 minutes. The issues we're having around preservation, nature, and what I've learned is that scientists need help and they're running out of time. Project 15 is about building this bridge between the scientific community and the technical community so they can learn what tools we can bring to the table.
The Serengeti is one of the largest parks in Africa at 17,000 square kilometers, yet the Serengeti only has 150 guards. Imagine trying to protect the state of Maryland with 150 rangers. It's impossible. We started on Trail Guard about 4 years ago. It's a sensor put out in the field that can detect poachers and stop them before they kill. The first ones were successful. The problem was that our camera system sent every image, and that drained the battery really fast.
By listening to him, I learned that a solution that I had designed applied, and that was a safety platform called Project Edison. His camera sent events. It was the same as anything we did in a city, and that was my aha moment.
Sarah talks about the idea, and I said, I know how to do it.
We started drawing boundaries and where we could put devices and how that could all be brought up to the cloud for better notification of rangers.
We built Azure as a hyperscale cloud services platform. We're able to provide machine learning, analytics, or reporting all over the world.
Microsoft is really advancing these deep neural network models that are able to identify any species that is of concern to conservation.
We have a truly hybrid platform. I can run the same services that I have in the cloud down at the edge.
Microsoft's been dedicated to environmental sustainability for a long time. We have this culture that says if you can invent a technology solution to that problem, you should do that.
Project 15 can really have a bigger impact with something I already know.
There's a breadth of challenges that need to be solved. There's connectivity, networking, there's devices to be built.
One idea is to use the drone and the AI, and with this solar cells, we can cover big parks in Africa with the self-charging drones.
These are the kind of ideas. There's animal preservation, climate research, water purification.
We are looking for contribution from people with different technologies, skills, experience. Everybody can contribute.
Whatever you are interested in, take 15 minutes just to think about it.
How can the solutions you're developing be reimagined in the pursuit of solving some of the world's most critical challenges? Join Project 15 and bring your ideas to the table.
Please join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Please join us.
All right.
I think
Wait,
I don't know if you can echo.
Let me
Let me
know.
know.
Yes, no.
I've been muted. All right, so can you still hear me? Yes? Okay. I'll just keep talking until somebody tells me they can't hear me, which is fine. Today's show is a little bit about technical difficulties, but it's also about how do we use IoT to solve technical difficulties when it comes to preservation. So I wanted to give you the origin story of how Project 15 came to be. And I hinted at it in the opening that I was going to talk a little bit about Project Edison. But a little about me. So I'm Sarah Maston. I'm a senior IoT solution architect here at Microsoft. I live near headquarters. So for me, it's early. I know for you, it's in the evening. I'm really, really thrilled to be here today. My hobbies include chasing my 9-year-old around, and you might see him run by because we're doing homeschooling. And I love to build Legos, and I have been keeping up on my science fiction reading, especially because I haven't traveled for the past year. My specialty is process architecture and data architecture, and I've been doing that for about 20 years, give or take. So this is Thomas, and her name was Thomas, who is a girl, and this was my cat, and she looks a little cranky. Not a lot of people know that you got Project 15. It went from cats to elephants, but how did that happen? So what happened is that there was I lived in this building in Redmond, Washington, which is on the west coast of the United States. And I lived on the top floor. And one day I was just standing outside and I saw a whole bunch of smoke, just so much smoke. And I freaked out and I ran into the building to go save my cat. The alarm bell had not gone off yet. And, I ran upstairs. I threw the cat into the cat carrier. We ran back downstairs. It was pretty frightening and confusing. And then the bell went off and I was standing outside, and then the fire folks came and, they said, "Oh, everything's fine. Everybody go back in." And the next day I saw the gentleman that runs the building. And I said, hey, what was that about? Because I've never seen so much smoke. And he said, I don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, that fire was out for 20 minutes before your bells went off. And I went, what? And then he said, and by the way, that fire was as far away from you as possible. It was on the other side of the campus. And I went, I'm sorry, I don't understand. And then he goes, oh, I know what happened. They put up a fan and it blew the smoke because underneath my buildings was a garage level where all the cars were parked. And it had moved across the bottom level, and that's what I saw. And I kind of, jumped up and down a little bit and said, oh my God, there has to be a better way to talk to people within an emergency. Because if only there was an app or some sort of sensor that could have told me that. And what happened was I went to work the next day and I drew something, and it became Project Edison. And what it was, and this is the proof of concept story with which I got the idea funded to be built with a partner of ours, was that if you could just use a simple light bulb, and imagine this is Microsoft's campus. Microsoft's campus is very large. It's the size of a town. There's 120 buildings or something, which is very, very large. And if you just put a geocoded light bulb or use, a bracelet, that you're wearing, that if something happened on your campus, you would be within this radius of awareness. And what it meant was if the light bulb turned yellow or your bracelet vibrated to let you know that something was happening, that you wouldn't panic. You would know that you were not in immediate danger. And therefore, when the notifications came in, whether it's Twitter or something else, there would be much less confusion if you knew that you were actually safe and now you had to go get instructions to go do something. And of course, if something happened closer to you, a sensor would turn the light bulb red, you'd get a different kind of vibration, and you'd say, ooh, I have to get out of here. And so this concept of using IoT to communicate in an emergency was actually used. We had put it out on GitHub with our partner, and that partner took that idea and they created a safety solution for schools. And April of 2019, the Houston School District, one of the school districts there, was using it to make a safe school using communication in this way. And that was incredibly exciting. And at the same time, I met a gentleman whose name was Eric, who you saw in the video. Dr. Dinerstein is one of the world's leading conservationists. He's fascinating. He's also an author, and if you're interested, it's his career is really, really interesting to go and look at. But what he's done recently is he invented this TrailGuard AI solution. He's at a nonprofit organization called Resolve, and this solution. He won a grant from the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation and with Microsoft's AI for Earth to build out this idea of making a really smart camera trap to catch poachers before they can kill. And so I met Eric and we started talking, and he was mentoring me on all of these use cases. And Daisuke, who is in the video, who wound up to be my co-founder of this and the first person I asked to join me, I drew this picture, and this was the first napkin drawing, if you will, of what conservation looked like to me. And to me, it was a population that can't defend itself. It was a place where they live, and you're trying to stop someone or something or make them less impactful using sensors. And then you're trying to communicate to people that can get help. And in the case of the park, it is the rangers. And what was so interesting about this to me is that this was just another use case like Project Edison. And I thought, well, what else can the commercial solutioning world, people like me, do to help? Because until that moment, I had watched the Earth in decline. I've been on the Earth almost 50 years. I'm a little younger than Earth Day, which is, I think, 51 years old, this last April. But, you know, I never felt like I could really do anything. And so for this one moment, I went, whoa, okay, maybe we can help. Because if you start to think about this, if you're applying what was Project Edison into anti-poaching, well, what is the real difference between shoplifting or stealing a shirt from a big store and then stealing a pangolin from a park? You know, at its essence, there's no real difference between these use cases, just challenges to solve. And so we put up that video with the support of our group and our marketing, and that video went out in October of 2019. We put up this webpage. This webpage no longer is up, so this is what it looked like, and it pretty much just said, hey, if you'd like to come find out if we can help, are you a scientist? Are you a technologist? And then we asked a few questions about what you did and tried. That was our first attempt to really build sort of the friends of Project 15. And this was a type of phone in our eyes. And we kind of sat and waited to see if anyone would call. So about 3 months later, we got the first call in the form of an email. And it was from a company called Zambezi Partners. And this was an interesting startup that was building a solution for conservation to protect an elephant corridor. And although they were working with device partners and they were working with scientists on the data science side, they really didn't know much about building that in-between IoT platform. And so, you know, oh, okay, that's interesting. All right, I think we can help you. And then the second call came in, and this was from an organization called the Red Panda Network. The Red Panda Network is another interesting organization. I had never heard of them, and then once I started looking, I was like, oh, these are very cute. Red pandas are adorable. They are not related to giant pandas, by the way, and they were discovered, I believe, 50 years. Don't quote me, but I think 50 years before giant pandas were discovered. So we met with them, and then the third call came. And the third call came from a woman named Yoko Watanabe. And Yoko ran a group in the United Nations Development Program called the Small Grants Programme, the GEF Small Grants Programme, which is implemented by the United Nations Development Program. And she operated in 125 countries. This is another organization that I, to be honest, had not heard of. And once I started learning about them, and they're fascinating and they do such important work around the world. And she thought, well, we're interested to know if you can bring this type of thinking about how to apply your commercial processes of solutioning into this space with us. And at this point, you know, when we were working with Zambezi and we were working with Red Panda, you know, that's two projects, and Daisuke and I spend our nighttime and weekend hours working on it. It's truly a passion project. But when we met Yoko and her team, she has thousands of projects. And so now we suddenly had to start thinking about, well, how are we going to scale? Because that's kind of a scale problem. And they gave us 3 projects to start with from the Small Grants Program. And so now we had 5 projects, and I started taking notes about how do scientific projects stall? Why do they stall? What are their roadblocks? And so this is the catch-22, and that's a term, I don't know if you're familiar with it, so I'll explain it. A catch-22 is when you have, you know, it's a catch-22. I want to go to the store, but then I don't know how to go to the store, but I'd like to go to the store. You know, it's actually named after a book, if you want to read it. So the catch-22 was, I know what to do with the data, and I can get the grant to work with the data, but I don't know how to get the data. And so, how do I get that new data from camera traps, etc.? And that's an IoT problem, not a data science problem. Proof of concepts. I know how to build, it's another type of catch-22, but I know how to build a device, but I don't know how to build a holistic cloud solution. Number 3 that I started to notice was small fish. So this means, maybe it's someone who's a bit younger and has an idea, but doesn't have the agency or know where to go with the idea yet. Maybe it's somebody who didn't go to college and is not an academic, and they perhaps feel that the grants aren't for them because maybe they're attached to PhDs or something like that. Here's the original spirit of Project 15 was the pit of financial despair. So this was, when we came out with the video, I really felt that grant money might be wasted if you're trying to reinvent something that exists already and we just don't know each other yet. So that was the pit of financial despair. And then we have showcase. Maybe you've partnered with somebody and then you did something for an event, but then it didn't go anywhere or it stalled out after that. And then scaling out a solution. Now there is a slide at Microsoft somewhere in my commercial world, which pretty much has all of these things as reasons that every solution can stall. So there wasn't much of a difference between our commercial solutioning world and the scientific developer solutioning world. So the next idea that I remember talking to Daisuke, I said, well, what if, this is a big what if project, honestly. What if we created 80% of this solution and put it on GitHub? Because we kept drawing the same architectures, and that's what I do in my day job. Is I come in and I help partners. What does that architecture look like on Azure? Well, here's what it looks like, and that same set of services was always the same. And we learned that people did not want to. They didn't have time to learn all those bits and pieces. They just needed to get going, and we're out of time. So why not? It takes Daisuke and me days to put something like that together, and then it's faster to learn it. So that's what we did, and our goals were that we could kind of jump the skill gap, because that's how you learn. You find out how to do something, you have a challenge at work, and then you go figure out how to do it. Your first time you're solutioning, it's not exactly glamorous, it's not pretty. I did this with data warehousing back in the day. I just needed to learn how to do that fact table. The next one I did was prettier, but really get them going and boost the timeline. And then we are running out of time. And so something that's simple for me to do, for Daisuke to do, for you to do, that's hard for other people. And we mustn't forget that. Like, we have skills that are really important and can contribute. And then we don't want this to fail because it's expensive to get an IoT specialist. But if you have a lot of it done, then you open the door to maybe a generalist developer, someone who's learning IoT. You want to just make a nice UI on top of it. You want to just connect a device. There's much less, and it opens the door for many, many more people to either get involved with IoT or just expand on it. And it also opened it up to the open source community and developers and universities to be able to use this. So this is what it looked like. This is the high level. If you go out to our GitHub page, you'll see this picture and many, many others. But this one is, the light green boxes on here, they just come with it. You're going to spin it up and you get it. The darker green, these are things that are going to need a little more customization. And then these blue boxes, that is your 10 to 20%, that really differentiates your solution from any other IoT solution out there. Because if you're familiar with building IoT solutions, the plumbing that we put in there is very similar but it's really just when you start doing business logic, when you're, what actions am I taking from this data? That's where it starts to get unique. And so this is the more technical architecture of it, reference architecture. And it's coming in through IoT Hub. This is all the usual suspects, especially if you've been developing on Azure IoT. And the parts in red are those that can be added on. And we use this as an example as we talk to our scientific developer friends now that we have for Project 15. Now, one thing to mention, and maybe in the future, Daisuke can come visit your event here and meet you all, because this spins up in under 10 minutes. And so once you click deploy to Azure, it'll set it up in your tenant, and we've written instructions that are hopefully helpful if somebody's just beginning, and for anyone more experienced, you're just like, okay, done. So the next thing was partnering for scale. So we, as I mentioned, as the projects were coming in, we had to start thinking about, okay, well, how else are we going to, growth hack these solutions and scale them? So we have a Microsoft Capstone program that is run by a colleague of mine. His name is Lee Stott. And I was talking to him. I said, hey, what if we could partner the students that are doing their senior capstones, their thesis work at universities with NGO nonprofits, and then they move these projects along further. And he said, well, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do that. So I'm excited to say that recently we've announced the results of the first batch of capstone projects that came out. And I'm going to highlight one of them today. And this is with the UCL, stands for University College London. So I mentioned the Red Panda Network in the beginning. So this was the process architecture summary for what was going on there. It was a very manual process. You walked up into the Himalayas, you collected data, you took observations, you wrote them down on pen and paper. They had some first generation camera traps. And then it took months to get results for Sonam, who runs that organization. Now, what Farid, who was the student who worked with the Red Panda Network on his capstone, did is he took all of that and he created this, what I think is beautiful UI application that incorporates custom vision. And now the images can be uploaded automatically. They, tagged panda, not panda, and all of that is available out on GitHub if you'd like to go explore it. I put the link down at the bottom here. It's pretty phenomenal. And one thing that he did, which I think is really interesting, is he turned any smartphone camera into a camera trap by using the metadata and then putting it on a map. So if you have different use cases, you can use his work to help your solutioning. It's pretty good stuff there. Oh, there he is. Look how cute he is. I'm a big fan of the red panda. There's only 2,500 of them left in the wild. That's one thing that I've learned since starting this project 2 years ago is, there are incredible people out there building solutions for our planet. And, there are sad facts as well, but there's a lot of hope in this solutioning community. So if you're interested or you're going to go volunteer or work on something with an organization you like, I think you'll have a good time with all that you're going to learn. It's really, really cool, actually. So the next idea, because capstones are, pretty high touch, they took about 3 months each. And we came up with this idea around, well, could we just talk to a nonprofit and get their data and some use cases they need help solving and see what happens? Why not? So the next what if, we partnered with, let me get my slides to work. We partnered with the University of Oxford and their AI class for their continuing education. And I reached out to the well, I already told you what it was. These slides are out of order. So I reached out to the Elephant Listening Project And this is a fascinating organization that does what it looks like it does. It listens to elephants. They are based in Cornell University, which is in New York in the United States. And they pretty much put out listening devices. And what's interesting about elephants is that they speak in a frequency that we cannot hear. So biological males and biological females, our ears, depending on which ears you have, you cannot hear them. They speak in something called infrasound, and it was discovered about 30 years ago by, I believe, by Dr. Joyce Poole. And you see these echoes here? That's an echo from the reverberation of their rumbles. And so I've learned a lot about infrasound in the last few months. I'm by no means an expert in it, but if you're interested in that and you're doing other, sound-based research or projects, this could be really interesting to you. And something that happened in that class is, we posed the question and said, here is a project, here are some use cases. They have never been able to count the elephants in a data segment here. They have been able to say if it's one elephant, and they have been able to say it is 2 or more elephants. And so I'm happy to share, and I can share some links after this talk if you're interested, that one of the student groups at Oxford found a way to automatically count elephants for the first time and put it out on open source. So for the section of the scientific community that's researching that, they now have that available to them to help them with their work. Okay, I have no idea how I'm doing on time because I wasn't really paying attention to time because I'm bad with time. That's another weird fact. It's not on LinkedIn. I'm terrible with time. But I'm going to talk about graphs a little bit. So graphs, I don't know how many of if we were live, I would say, raise your hand if you like graphs. I love graphs. To be fully transparent. I think graphs are super interesting. From a data perspective, the first part of my career was very much in relational data. And then of course it matured into dimensional, and, then you've got columnar databases, all the things about data. If you come from a background like mine, as you know, databases didn't really change until the apps, the rise of the apps, and big data 1.0 showed up, and suddenly there was like every different kind of awesome weird database was being invented to deal with how much data we were producing. Graphs are, social graphs. I put this here because they are the most well-known, especially if you're not coming from a data background, but Facebook, LinkedIn, many of these apps that we use for social media would not be possible without graphs, because graphs are a relationship first data structure. So you can, if you're using relational databases or RDBMS type databases, when you get too many joins, you fall over. And that was a huge problem. And when you start getting into, advanced analytics, the ability to start querying relationships is really interesting, because with this structure, you can say, what's my 4th degree friend who likes to listen to the Smiths, and then you get a list. And recommendation engines are based on graphs, for shopping, hey, you bought this 16 years ago and we got a record of it, and now we'd like to sell you this. Isn't that exciting? Those recommendation engines are based on graph technology. This is another type of graph. In a past life, I invented a graph for nutrition when I was at IBM. And I just put this in here as an example besides social graphs, because this is the beat. And the nutrition graph was to connect food by phytochemicals in the food to reactions in your body to diseases and fighting diseases. So that's something that in a relational model, and I know I spent 12 years inventing that, that falls over. But graphs really open up the ability to do really weird and interesting things. all of this is to lead up to the fact that Azure Digital Twins is now graph-based. And this is really, really interesting. And I don't know how many of you, I would, again, show of hands, who is playing with this. So this is interesting. And let me tell you why I think this is interesting. So I have a thought exercise, and I'm going to close out with this. And 2 years ago, when I started talking to people about conservation, I realized there's two sides to conservation. There's the park side, where, things, what Eric is doing with camera traps. There's other organizations like Smart Parks, and, they're doing smart collars and things like that, drones. That's all to manage the safety of the animals and the people that work on the park side. Now, on the other side, there's a very, serious and sad side, as we know, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit, because once the animal has been poached at the airports and at the shipping container place, the ports, when they find remains, there is a whole nother group of scientists where they work to figure out where those remains came from, which elephant family was affected by this, crime, etc. And these are the justice side systems. And this is where you have great organizations working to figure that side out. But in the middle, there's a huge gap. And it's in this gap where all the bad guys get away. And so I have a colleague, and his name's Kirk Arthur, and he's one of the leaders of our public safety, government, and justice side of the Microsoft house. And in the beginning of the project, I met with him. I had lunch, and I said, I don't know anything about catching bad guys, but you do. And so, I started to learn about this side of conservation. And I met another scientist whose name was Dr. Wasser, and he works at University of Washington, and he does a lot of genetic analysis to trace back where these things came from. And so I started drawing something. So on the park side, if you look at this in a very simple graph representation, you have an elephant who has a collar, who has a movement sensor, and then a fall down alarm, and then it sends a message. This is very typical transactional IoT. The sensor feels something, and then it tells you something, and then you do something. Things, insights, actions, right? So if you kind of expand out a little bit and you say, all right, well, now I'm going to put on a graph. I have a park. My park has a fence. My fence has a camera. My camera can detect object detection of a human. The poacher is walking, doing an action. The camera picks it up, it sends an alert, and you have a system that knows what to do with that. That's very traditional IoT. ML down here on the camera, etc. You have your elephant again. I have a fall down alarm, my collar, and now I have two messages. And what's interesting about this is that there's another variable that's not recorded, but it will be recorded by the devices, which is time. And so now when you know that I saw a human and then this elephant fell down, was there enough time that seems like a poaching event? And that's what we do every day, all of us, right? And so, and there's one other thing I just want to put out there for your thinking, is something that I conceptualized as very nuanced and unique to these types of solutions, is that when we build IoT solutions that talk to machines, it is very easy to tell a machine, well, easy is oversimplifying, but for the sake of argument, it is easier to tell a machine to stop doing something if it's vibrating and we pick it up on a sensor. But the elephant has to do something on its being, on its living creature side of electricity, to send this alert. And so that it is already more complex because of that fact. And you can't really talk back to the elephant and say, hey there, please go run over there. Like, it's just not a thing. So that's something to keep in mind of why these are such complex use cases when you start to think about them. Then we've got this process over here. So I added this to the graph. So we have a shipping container, and maybe there's a device that can smell something. It smells material, and it sends an alarm, and we get the message. And then we have a platform that tells us, right? Same IoT. But if we have these together in one system, and I put this little note here, if we were able to get the DNA of the elephant, the scientists can now work faster to figure out what was going on. And so this is just how sustainability and conservation would work on a graph as a thought exercise. So I wrote a longer article about this that I put on LinkedIn. If you're interested, I can share that. So that's really, really interesting to me. And something to know about the Project 15 open platform is that when you click deploy to Azure, we Azure Digital Twins enabled it a couple months ago. And so you actually just pick a true or false if you want the Digital Twins version versus the IoT PaaS, version without Digital Twins. So that's Project 15, plus a little bit about graph theory thought exercises. If you want to learn more, I've put the links. The Project 15 code link goes right out to our GitHub. It's written, and I love feedback, so if you have any feedback, send it to us. It's written so that if you're new to IoT and you're coming in possibly as a specialist from another specialty, you can come in, get an idea of what this is, and then as you click on deploy and the development guide, it gets more and more specific. It of course has links out to the MS Learn documentation. We have so much cool enablement stuff to get you going on Azure IoT. So we just made it as kind of a top level guide on where to go from here to try to help accelerate these solutions. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, reach out. And that is Project 15.
Wow, that was an amazing story, Sarah. And you already got me so excited about how you're using IoT. I do have a couple of questions though, because even though I'm still baffled by the simplicity that you used with the graph to explain all the relationships between the different actions and how you can respond to the situations. So the first question that popped up in my head was a bit focused on context awareness, because how are you gonna anticipate the fact that a lot of poachers are becoming smarter and becoming tech savvy as well, and starting to learn to use drones for their own use to track the animals and to well, I'm not gonna say find smarter ways to track them down, because I don't want to give them any ideas, but I think you understand where I'm going with my question. How are we gonna anticipate on them evolving?
So there are incredible, so cybersecurity is not my specialty. That's why, I have very smart friends like Kirk, and I've met such incredible people that are working on the justice side. There are such cool security firms for IoT that not only, they're not just doing people stuff, they're doing any kind of stuff. And so if that's an area you're interested in, absolutely. They write papers, of course, in this area. If you do get into this area, it is important to protect, what you're doing, etc. So, none of the camera traps that were on the map for the red panda, those are all fake. Those don't exist there on that map exactly. But it's the same kind of security that we need to do for any of us. It's why, I know this isn't an Azure Sphere talk, but it's why, Azure Sphere as an option for IoT security is a really good option, because we all need that safety from any kind of cyber type criminal. And that, yes. So my short answer is yes. And my longer answer is if you start to explore like the companies doing that with IoT and security, it's fascinating, especially if you're into that.
Okay, that makes sense. And I'll definitely start diving into that. Another thing that I remember from my Azure Fundamentals training and course is that, well, at least thinking of Africa, I do know that from a networking perspective, communications can be less trustful. So how do you deal with the fact that some of the data might not come across immediately? Or is there a mechanism within the solution, or maybe already built into Azure, that helps you to make sure that if there's any latency or any fallout in the network, that you still are able to retrieve the data that is cached or something like that?
Okay. So that is I mean, it's interesting because those latency issues, data, when the packets arrive, do all of those things. That's the same, we have those in industrial solutions. We have these problems if you're building a solution for a mine. Like, how do you talk to the people down in the mine, in the earth? How do you do the route, etc. LoRaWAN, is often talked about when you start talking about long distance and getting things in a vast area. Same thing. So if you're working on those types of solutions, that's what's interesting of coming in and helping, because that is an issue. One other thing to mention is that a lot of this is done on the edge, because you're working in areas that are so remote that you need to be doing that intelligence on the edge, and you need to be thinking of smart ways, because if you were going to share up every single picture through a satellite connection, I mean, it's expensive. And so this is really, it's sort of one of those things where they throw a limited set of tools on the table, and then we as technologists have to say, okay, how can we fix this? And so the answer is, again, yes. And there's like a bunch of ways to flip that Rubik's Cube to try to figure that out.
Well, thank you for giving me not just a short answer, but also a longer explanation, because my head is still trying to get all that data processed, and I might just need a little bit longer. One final question.
Maybe you should do that on your edge, Esther. Process it on the edge. Yeah.
Yes. I was wondering if there was a nice joke in there, but thanks for that. No, I just have one final question, because I personally am very interested in Project 15. But do you see that a lot of different countries, because your example, of course, is very focused on poachers, and Africa is a great example for that. But do you see a lot of different continents and countries developing a strong interest in Project 15 too?
So what's interesting is that, especially, and I'll, when I write about this, it expands into IoT is just in the middle of sustainability, because when you think about smart energy, you think about smart water, you think about smart waste, all of these solutions we've been doing. I have a sort of a quote that says, "Smart city is a sustainable city," and when we are trying to reduce energy bills, that's the immediate ROI on a solution that's smart energy. I have less money paid because my lights turn off and they're smart. But the reality is that that's leading to less consumption, which is leading to less of a footprint. And so, I use the original, example of Project 15 is conservation. But once you see that IoT is really, really in the middle of all of our sustainability efforts, it doesn't matter what kind of sensor you're attaching and what you're going to do with that 20% of your use case. Like, So yes, I'm hopeful. We've been working with different types of projects through the GEF Small Grants Program, where it's urban sustainability or smart oceans or land. So really, it's just such a big topic that it helps to just tell the use case of a smaller and then bring it into the bigger IoT driving sustainability story, like you're talking about.
Awesome. So thank you so very much for presenting and for educating us and encouraging me to understand that even a small change and a small adaptation of IoT can already help in basically the footprint that I have and the contributions that I can do to help for a sustainable world. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Such an incredible project, and I'm definitely going to check it out and see if I can contribute to it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.